The nation's most famous suspect, Luigi Mangione.
Luigi Mangione.
Luigi Mangione.
Luigi Mangione
has just pleaded not guilty.
has pleaded not guilty.
He is no hero.
Is Luigi Mangione? Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, was reportedly killed. This story leaves us with more questions than answers. How could a young man, blessed with wealth, privilege, and a promising future, become one of the most infamous criminals of his time?
Why did Luigi Mangione's case rise to the level of when we're talking about school shooters, we don't often see that additional charge.
Born into a life of luxury, with access to a prestigious education and a family legacy that placed him among the wealthiest, Luigi had every opportunity to succeed.
Mangione family is one of the prominent families of Baltimore County. They own a lot of real estate, they own golf courses. They're just a very well-respected name.
Instead of using his advantages for good, Luigi chose a path that led to his downfall. Now facing legal battles and a possible life sentence, people are left asking why. How could someone with so much to lose make choices that caused so much harm and shook an entire industry? Luigi's actions weren't impulsive. They were the result of months of planning. His frustration with the health insurance industry, especially with UnitedHealthcare and its CEO Brian Thompson, grew steadily over time.
In April 2021, Thompson's predecessor, Andrew Whitty, praised Thompson when announcing he'd been named CEO of the company. As CEO of UnitedHealth Group, Brian Thompson was responsible for leading growth across the company. Thompson was paid $10.2 million per year.
Luigi believed the health insurance industry was corrupt and driven by greed. Over time, his anger grew into deep resentment, taking over his thoughts. His frustration wasn't random. It was focused specifically on Brian Thompson, whom he blamed for the problems he saw in the system. The crime that followed wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a carefully planned and intentional act.
Detectives are optimistic they're closing in, but heading in now to a sixth day of searching, they still do not have an identity of the suspect or anyone in custody.
Luigi spent weeks carefully planning every detail of his actions. He wasn't acting out of desperation or confusion. He was focused and determined, carrying out a mission he had designed with precision. On the day of the crime, Midtown Manhattan was bustling like any other morning. People rushed to work, tourists explored the streets, and vendors set up their stands. Luigi moved calmly through the crowd, unnoticed. Surveillance footage later revealed him walking confidently, blending seamlessly into the flow of people. He didn't stand out, nor did he act strangely. To anyone watching, Luigi seemed like just another person going about his day. His demeanor was calm and controlled, showing no signs of nervousness or haste. There were no sudden movements, no indication that something extraordinary was about to happen. He was the picture of composure, almost robotic in his focus. The ordinary appearance of his actions made what followed even more chilling. No one could have guessed that a carefully planned crime was already in motion.
We were able to match that gun to the 3 shell casings that we found in Midtown at the scene of the homicide.
At one point during his walk, Luigi stopped at a nearby coffee shop. The cafe was busy with morning customers grabbing drinks or enjoying a quiet breakfast. Luigi walked in, ordered his coffee, and took a seat. To those around him, he looked like any other customer, calm, focused, and unremarkable. He sat quietly, sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone. It was a brief, seemingly ordinary moment, but in reality, it was part of his larger plan. The calmness of this pause underscored the cold, calculated nature of his intentions. No one could have known what was running through his mind. Was he reviewing the final details of his plan, waiting for the perfect moment to act, or simply passing time, reflecting on the weight of what he was about to do? If he felt any doubt or hesitation, it didn't show. To those around him, he appeared as just another man enjoying a quiet moment in the city. But this stop at the coffee shop wasn't just a break. It was a deliberate part of his strategy.
At this time, he is believed to be our person of interest in the brazen, targeted of Brian Thompson, CEO of UnitedHealthcare, last Wednesday in Midtown Manhattan. The suspect was in a McDonald's and was recognized.
Luigi was doing everything he could to stay unnoticed. Every move he made was carefully planned to avoid detection until the right moment. The day was calmed for now, but it was just the quiet before chaos unfolded. After leaving a coffee shop and stepping back onto the busy streets of Manhattan, Luigi was focused and prepared. His actions were smooth and controlled, showing he had planned every step in advance. To everyone around him, Luigi was just another person in the crowd, but his day had taken a dark turn. Later that morning, Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, was walking along West 54th Street after attending an investor conference. Unaware of the danger, he moved through the busy crowd. Luigi had been watching him, waiting patiently for the right moment. In a sea of people, Luigi's attention was locked onto one person, Brian Thompson. At 10:15 a.m., as Brian Thompson walked down the street, Luigi made his move. Without hesitation, he pulled out a gun and fired. The gunshot echoed, freezing everyone in place. Thompson collapsed to the pavement as chaos erupted. Some people screamed, others ducked for cover, but Luigi remained calm. Luigi's escape plan was already set in motion. A few blocks away, he had hidden an e-bike with its battery removed to prevent theft. After the shooting, he quickly re-etched the battery, got on the bike, and rode away with precision, avoiding crowded streets and intersections. By the time the police arrived, Luigi had disappeared into the city. Authorities immediately launched an investigation. They reviewed surveillance footage and interviewed witnesses. Although Luigi had blended into the crowd, his calm demeanor made him stand out. Days later, investigators uncovered evidence linking him to the crime: ballistics, fingerprints, and footage showing him walking calmly away from the scene. The most critical evidence was found when authorities searched Luigi's belongings. Everything pointed to him as the person responsible for the cold and calculated attack on Brian Thompson. Hidden among Luigi's possessions was a notebook filled with detailed entries that revealed his motivations and mindset leading up to the crime. The notebook painted a disturbing picture of a man deeply obsessed with the health insurance system, particularly with Brian Thompson. His writings were filled with anger and frustration about what he saw as corruption in the industry. This wasn't vague resentment. It was targeted hostility toward those he believed were responsible. His notebook read like a manifesto, accusing the health insurance system of exploiting the poor and perpetuating injustice. In one chilling entry, Luigi wrote, "The target is insurance, it checks every box." These words made it clear that his actions were not impulsive, but a calculated act of revenge against what he believed was a corrupt system. Days after the shooting, Luigi was apprehended in Altoona, Pennsylvania. A nationwide manhunt had narrowed down his location, leading to his capture. Authorities initially hoped his arrest would clarify the case, but instead, it revealed just how deeply he had planned his actions. Among his belongings, investigators found a 3D printed firearm, an unsettling discovery that highlighted his technical skill and willingness to go to extreme lengths. The weapon, undetectable by traditional security systems, was further proof of the premeditated nature of his crime. Alongside the firearm, police discovered ammunition with cryptic inscriptions, suggesting that Luigi wanted his actions to send a message. They also found a letter addressed to federal authorities. In the letter, Luigi confessed to the crime and took full responsibility. He emphasized that he had acted alone, with no outside help or collaborators. Everything had been self-funded and meticulously planned. By addressing the authorities directly, Luigi seemed intent on controlling the narrative, framing his actions as deliberate and justified rather than chaotic or impulsive. In the weeks following his capture, investigators dug deeper into Luigi's background, reviewing his communications and personal history. They uncovered a man consumed by his beliefs, someone whose frustration with the system had built up over time and ultimately turned into violence. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery was the realization that Luigi did not see his actions as a mistake. Instead, he viewed them as a calculated statement, a deliberate attempt to make his message heard. The revelations following Luigi's arrest sent shockwaves through both the public and legal communities. The discovery of the 3D printed firearm raised serious concerns about the ease of creating untraceable weapons. Law enforcement agencies were forced to confront the growing challenge posed by such technology. The cryptic inscriptions on the ammunition added another layer of mystery to Luigi's motivations. It became clear that his actions were not just tactical but symbolic, an act of defiance against a system he viewed as deeply corrupt and unjust. As the legal proceedings began, the case quickly became a national spectacle. Luigi faced multiple charges, including first-degree murder in New York and additional weapons-related charges in Pennsylvania. The federal government also stepped in, charging him with acts of. The involvement of multiple jurisdictions made the case even more complex, as each sought to hold Luigi accountable. Throughout the trial, Luigi remained calm and composed, showing little emotion despite the severity of the charges. At times, he even smiled in court, an unsettling gesture that sparked intense debate about his mental state and true motivations. Some saw him as a cold-blooded killer who had carried out a brutal act without remorse. Others began to view him as a symbol of resistance, a man who had taken violent action against what he saw as a corrupt system. Public opinion on Luigi's crime was deeply divided. On one side were those who viewed his actions as unforgivable a calculated attack on an innocent man and an act of. They demanded justice for Brian Thompson and his family, emphasizing the need for accountability. On the other side, some people began to see Luigi as a martyr, a vigilante who had acted against corporate greed and systemic corruption. This controversial perspective gained traction in certain circles, especially on social media. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, condemned those supporting Luigi Mangione, the suspect in the killing of Brian Thompson.
In some dark corners, this killer is being hailed as a hero. Hear me on this. He is no hero. The real hero in this story is the person who called 911 at McDonald's this morning. The real heroes every day in our society are the women and men who put on uniforms like these and go out in our communities to keep us safe. This killer was not a hero. He should not be hailed.
Debates about Luigi's actions exploded online, with some calling him a domestic and others praising him as a hero. Outside the courthouse, protests erupted. Some groups demanded justice for Thompson, while others called for systemic change in the health insurance industry. These clashing narratives highlighted deep societal divisions and brought broader issues, like corporate greed, institutional corruption, and public distrust in authority, to the forefront. In the end, Luigi's case became more than just a murder trial. It turned into a flashpoint for a national conversation about power, corruption, and the extreme actions individuals might take when they feel powerless. The legacy of his crime extended far beyond the courtroom, leaving society to grapple with the questions it raised. Luigi's crime, while horrific, sparked a debate that extended far beyond his individual actions. It forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about the systems that had driven him to violence.
Why you're here today?
We're here today because we wanted to use this moment to advocate for healthcare changes and hopefully, make some positive, goals with all of this situation. So,
explain to me your sign here. Why do you guys feel the way that you do about the defendant today?
We have our own reasons to be frustrated, fed up, angry with our government and our healthcare system. We both needed medical procedures that we had to fight for, that we shouldn't have had to fight for, especially being Americans. We're taught and told how great it is to be an American. Best country in the world. I shouldn't have to fight to save my life on a phone, getting denied.
We are here because I have been personally affected by my health care and my inability to get health care because of my insurance and our just frankly terrible American healthcare system.
The incident raised difficult questions about the intersection of personal grievances, systemic injustice, and the potential for radical action. In doing so, it left an undeniable mark on public consciousness, one that would not be easily forgotten. In the aftermath of Luigi's arrest, a public poll revealed surprising results. A significant portion of young adults expressed that they found Luigi's actions somewhat understandable, if not acceptable. This finding deeply unsettled many observers who had expected universal condemnation of his crime. The results raised troubling questions about societal unrest and the ways public narratives can shape perceptions of criminal actions. Was it Luigi's choice of target, a wealthy CEO from a widely criticized industry, that swayed public opinion? Or was it a broader cultural sentiment of frustration with systemic inequality and injustice that resonated with so many? As public discourse continued, the legal battle surrounding Luigi's actions progressed swiftly. Prosecutors built a strong case against him, portraying Luigi as a cold, calculating individual who had meticulously planned the murder with chilling precision. His evidence was overwhelming: surveillance footage, eyewitness testimonies, the 3D printed firearm, and his detailed notebook outlining his grievances and plans. The prosecution also emphasized the human impact of Luigi's crime. They highlighted the suffering of Brian Thompson's family, friends, and colleagues, focusing on the deep emotional and psychological scars caused by Luigi's actions. Their goal was to remind the public that behind every headline and debate were real people whose lives had been shattered. Despite the strength of the prosecution's case, Luigi's defense team prepared a different narrative. They argued that Luigi's actions were not born out of sheer malice, but from a misguided sense of moral outrage, a belief that he was acting in response to a broken and unjust system. According to the defense, Luigi's crime was not the act of a cold-blooded, but rather the desperate response of a man who felt he had no other way to be heard. The trial became more than just a legal proceeding. It became a stage for society to examine its deepest flaws. The debate over Luigi's actions revealed deep divisions in public opinion and underscored the growing frustration with systemic injustices.
The second thing I want to make a record of, Your Honor, is I'm very concerned about my client's right to a fair trial in this case. He's being prejudiced by some statements that are being made by government officials. His rights are being violated. He's a young man, and he is being treated like a human ping pong ball between two warring jurisdictions here. These federal and state prosecutors are coordinating with one another, but at the expense of him. They have conflicting theories in their indictments, treating him like he is like some sort of political fodder, like some sort of spectacle. He's been cooperative with law enforcement. He had been in custody for over a week. He waived extradition. He was cooperative at all accounts. There was no reason for the NYPD and everybody to have these big assault rifles that, frankly, I had no idea was in their arsenal. Your Honor, he's not a symbol. He's somebody who is afforded the right to a fair trial. He's innocent until proven guilty. And the mayor was talking to jurors, future potential jurors that elected him. Those are the people that elected him, that he is talking to and calling this man a terrorist.
Whether viewed as a villain or a martyr, Luigi Mangione's story became a powerful symbol of a society struggling to reconcile its values with its realities. The defense team pointed to the contents of Luigi's notebook, which revealed his deep anger toward the health insurance industry and its perceived exploitation of vulnerable people. They framed his actions as a reaction to systemic corruption and injustice. While this argument could not absolve Luigi of guilt, it opened the door to a rare and controversial legal tactic: jury nullification. Jury nullification happens when a jury chooses to acquit a defendant despite clear evidence of guilt, based on moral or ethical beliefs. In Luigi's case, the defense seemed to be setting the stage for such an outcome by focusing on his motivations and portraying his actions as a response to larger societal problems. Their goal was to appeal to the jury's sense of empathy for Luigi's frustrations, even if they could not condone his violent methods. This strategy introduced a significant challenge for the prosecution. They not only had to prove Luigi's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, but also had to counter any sympathy jurors might feel for his ideological motives. Prosecutors argued that while Luigi's grievances might have been rooted in real societal issues, his violent actions were unjustifiable and could not be excused. For the defense, pursuing this strategy was risky. It relied on the assumption that some jurors might resonate with Luigi's ideological stance and ultimately decide to acquit him on moral grounds, despite overwhelming evidence of his guilt. As the trial progressed, it became clear that this case was no longer just about Luigi Mangione's actions. It had transformed into a symbol of larger societal debates about justice, moral responsibility, and how society frames crime and punishment. Luigi's trial had evolved into a cultural moment, forcing society to confront uncomfortable truths about systemic inequality, frustration with power structures, and the fine line between activism and violence. The trial drew intense national attention, with every development reported by the media. Public opinion remained sharply divided. On one side were those who viewed Luigi as a cold-blooded killer deserving the harshest punishment possible. They argued that no grievance, no matter how valid, could justify the of Brian Thompson. To them, Luigi's actions represented a tragic and senseless escalation of frustration. On the other side were those who saw Luigi as a symbol, a man who had acted out of desperation against a system he believed was broken. These differing views underscored deep societal divides, turning Luigi's trial into more than just a courtroom drama. It became a reflection of the broader tensions in society and the ongoing struggle to address systemic problems without resorting to violence. Luigi Mangione's case sparked a broader conversation about justice, activism, and the limits of acceptable protest. In the courtroom, both the prosecution and the defense were engaged in a battle that went beyond the details of the crime itself. Each side had to address not only the evidence but also the larger societal questions the case had come to represent. For the prosecution, the case was about upholding the rule of law, regardless of Luigi's motivations. They argued that no amount of societal frustration could justify cold-blooded. For the defense, the trial was an opportunity to challenge traditional ideas of justice. They suggested that Luigi's actions, while violent and destructive, stemmed from a deep sense of societal outrage, one that, in their view, deserved consideration. As the trial unfolded, it became clear that the proceedings were about much more than determining Luigi's guilt or innocence. The courtroom had become a stage for examining the broader societal forces that shaped Luigi's actions and whether those forces should influence the jury's verdict. The outcome of the trial carried far-reaching implications for how society views the intersection of justice, activism, and violence. The case became a cultural flashpoint, drawing sharp lines between two opposing perspectives. On one side were those who demanded accountability for what they saw as a senseless, violent crime. On the other were those who viewed Luigi's actions as a form of resistance, a desperate act in a world where many feel unheard and ignored. Ultimately, Luigi Mangione's trial was about more than just one man or one crime. It forced society to grapple with fundamental questions about justice, systemic inequalities, and the consequences of extreme actions. It became a moment of national reflection, sparking debates about the power of protest, the fine line between activism and extremism, and how far individuals can or should go when challenging entrenched systems of power. The trial would continue to unfold, but its impact would be felt long after the final verdict was delivered. The outcome would not only decide Luigi's fate, but also shape society's understanding of the balance between moral outrage and the rule of law. It was a defining moment, one that would leave a lasting mark on how society views acts of protest, justice, and the acceptable limits of dissent.